Welcome to the Santa Cruz Coffee Break. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcast, please follow, hit the like button, or any subscribes. It really helps us with the algorithms. Santa Cruz Coffee Break is produced by the Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum. All opinions are those of the speakers. We invite you to join us on the Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum at SCGCPF for more fun. Now, let's get on with this installment of Santa Cruz Coffee Break. We'd like to welcome everybody to the 98th podcast of the Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum, and we have a returning guest this time from the UK, John Stubbings. We're so honored to talk to you, John. I know when we talked to you before, you were working on a new book. So, let's present to you the author of The Devil Is in It, and now the new book, The Guitar Detective. So welcome in, John.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed last session. We went down lots of interesting rabbit holes. So I'll try not to go down too many this time, but I think it's unlikely. I think you guys like a rabbit hole.
We do. We answered that in almost direct unison. And apparently, John and I both got the memo to wear our Santa Cruz guitar shirts today. We had no idea we were going to end up this way, but that's how we are. Yeah. So
my one, by the way, was free. Richard gave it to me when I visited quite a few years ago, actually, when I was researching for The Devil Is in It.
Oh, very nice.
I don't tell everyone in case everyone thinks they can, get the airfare to Santa Cruz and get a free T-shirt.
Well, that's probably combined with it. So start us down the road, John. The Guitar Detective.
Yeah. So I wrote finished writing The Devil Is in It probably at the very back end of 2018. And just before we were about to put it together or put it to bed, I had a stroke, a brain bleed. And that sort of took me off my feet for a while. I lost a bit of eyesight and some of the cognitive stuff that allows you to recognize people in the street, and quite a lot of therapy. And we got it all back together, and The Devil Is in It came out late 2019. And as you may recall, it was a limited edition of 500 hand-bound books, and they all went pretty quickly, which was great. And once we'd sort of done the mopping up, I was looking at this huge pile of notes from interviews I'd done as I was researching the book. A lot of them on the road trip that I'd done to meet a variety of people, including Richard, who I'd met before because I'd ordered a couple of guitars from him in person. And they were really great stories, but they just didn't make the edit. They were either sort of slightly off topic or they were not really right for the book. And some of them were just amazing. Sort of stories about guitars that I nearly bought, or a guy who thought he had Hank Williams's original Dreadnought, but did he really? Lots of sort of stuff like that. And then lots of stories about some fantastic players, some of which were sort of on brief and others that sort of weren't. And I thought, I need to tell some of these stories. And it sort of goes back to the 90s. Back in the 90s, I was traveling in America quite a lot for business. And any city I went to, I'd always find the guitar shop. And I'd try and visit a few thrift stores and pawn shops in the hope of finding that mythical guitar that no one had ever recognized before. And I was offered a guitar that looked like being a Martin, but it had no Martin logos on it, nothing on the headstock and nothing inside. But I was assured by the guy who was selling it that it was actually a real Martin. Someone had scraped the stuff off for nefarious reasons, and that it had actually belonged to quite a famous player. And you always take those stories with a pinch of salt. And I knew a fair amount about old guitars, but not enough. And I came very close to buying it, but then realized it was probably an employee model, an employee build. And I know most of the guitar companies usually allow the people who work there to use materials and make their own version. And that's what it was. And I sort of thought, do I really want it? Don't I want it? And I didn't buy it. The other theme that ran through the original Devil Is In It was the number of Americans who came to London during the 50s and 60s. A lot of them were black blues players who couldn't actually get work in America because that market had dried up really for filling concert halls, as well as people like Paul Simon and Ramblin' Jack Elliott and obviously Dylan. And I knew a lot about, very close to where we live is Richmond in Surrey. It's a very nice sort of provincial suburban area of London. And it had lots of blues clubs in the 60s. And a lot of the black players, Muddy Waters and Big Bill, all came over and played. And I sort of started putting something together that might be a way of using all those stories. And that's sort of what I did. And I needed to do more research, and I went to Paris, spent a lot of time in Paris talking to people about the Paris scene in the 40s and 50s, and also what had happened during the war, because as you know, Paris was occupied during the war. And whilst the Nazis had a bit of a view about black musicians being degenerates and not worthy of being able to breathe the same air, etc., etc. But also they had a real love. A lot of the German soldiers who came to Paris were really enthralled by the jazz clubs and the blues clubs. So Django Reinhardt did a lot of his best work during the war years, admittedly primarily to German audiences in Paris in the jazz clubs. And again, while I was in Paris, I met lots of people who had either not necessarily, some of them had been in Paris during the war, but had relatives who lived there. And suddenly it started weaving a story together that would enable me to use the stuff I'd amassed during my years researching The Devil Is In It. I mean, this is so the book's out. So that's the book. It's been put together physically to match The Devil Is In It. So it's hand bound, hand assembled. It's got lots of photographs, because a lot of the stories in it, a lot of the things that happen in the book are true. Most of the characters in it are true. And essentially the book is about a guy who goes into a guitar shop in London, one that he's visited many years, and up on the wall there was a lovely old guitar, and the guy who owned the store would never sell it. No, I'm keeping it there because the guy who owns it is coming back for it, and I'll never sell. And I knew the guy. I know the store really well. I knew the guy very well, and he talked about who'd played the guitar, and I couldn't work out whether it was true story. There was stories that it was given by Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones to a black musician, and he lost it, etc., etc. So the story is fundamentally someone a little bit like me, a guitar enthusiast, who buys this old guitar with unproven provenance. It's got a story that it was owned by a black blues guitarist who left it behind, and the character buys the guitar and then goes in search of the guy who allegedly owned it. And so it's what would pompously be called a picaresque book, because it's a journey. So he goes to Paris, he goes to the south of France, and then the book's set in 1990. And 1990 is an important time. It's an important year because there are cell phones, but there aren't many of them. And they weigh about 20 pounds, or they're about that big. And there are computers, but there is no internet. Because if you were telling this story now, it would be a very short book, because it would basically say, I've got this guitar, you'd put it into AI, and the AI would tell you that guitar was made in 1947, it's been made by this company, and it was owned by this musician, or whatever. So the work would be done for you. The thing about 1990 is there are computers, but there's no internet. People are still using microfiches to look at data and to do research. People are using faxes, and to talk to someone or to reach someone who might be in a research library, you have to make a phone call and talk to them. And that's what the book is about. It's about a guy who buys this guitar and gets into discovering this person. Who was he? Was he real? And it's about that journey, and a journey through America, and meeting some interesting characters. So that's the plot. It's a love story to the guitar, like my previous book. Is a love story to the guitar, the thing I adore. But also, it's a love story within it. And I think I'm under no illusions that the bulk of the people who will enjoy this book, will read this book, will buy it, are probably guys. But I think most guys are actually quite romantic at heart. And the idea of going on a big road trip and seeing what you discover, in a way, it's an echo of the road trip I did for the Devil. I went on that with a mission, but no idea where I'd go and which roads would take me where. And that's what the book's about. So,
Wow.
and I've written a number of drafts of it. I've had quite a lot of beta readers, which is the term for people who you give an early draft of the book to and say, right, read it, forget it's been written by me, just give me your brutal opinion. If you don't get any further than page 10, then that's the result, because it tells me that I need to do something to make it compelling to read. If you find some of the characters unbelievable, but a lot of then tell me, and I can amend that. And it's now, the final version was about the 5th full draft, and it's quite a meaty book. It's 470 pages. If I had more time, I probably could have made it 400 pages, but it was fun to write, and the writing of it became a bit of an adventure for me. And there was a point about 18 months ago, maybe a little longer, when I decided I'm never going to be able to finish this. And then fortunately, I sort of found the way to do it, which in itself was a sort of quite a big thing for me. So it was fun writing.
That's those guitars are out there. They are out there, and the special ones really kind of stand out, and you get a chance to, from a guitar player's point of view, you get a chance to play one of them, and it's kind of for me, it's a bit of a holy experience.
Yeah.
You know, it really is, to think that I'm holding this thing that, wow,
Yeah.
you know, just
And I think I absolutely align with that. I mean, and I think it's whether it's a brand new guitar or an old guitar, and we call it an old guitar, or an old guitar that belonged to someone famous. They're all magical experiences. When you pick up, you know, obviously we're all lovers of the work that Richard Hoover and his team do, but when you pick up, you know, a special guitar that may have been made of timber that Richard's hoarded for 50 years, or whether it's just a beautifully made instrument, that's special when you pick it up, because you know this is a work. It's not the work, obviously, with Santa Cruz, it's not the work of one pair of hands, but it's the work of a pretty magical team with a lot of oversight from Richard. And I bought my fair share of single luthier guitars, and you know that, you know, they don't come together very quickly. And then equally, you pick up an old guitar and you think lots of people have played this. You know, my old birth year, I've got a birth year Martin single 018. Sorry, my memory's going. And I know so many people have owned that guitar. And you do feel the spirit. And then particularly when you pick up, I know when I played at the first Fretboard Summit, I had the luck to interview David Crosby, and I played the D45 that he played at Woodstock. And even though he was in the room, or in the case of that, he was in the field, because we were in a field around the back of his caravan, and playing that was sort of magical.
yeah.
It was at Woodstock, but it got played on stage at Woodstock.
I was lucky enough at that first thing to record Crosby and John Henry, that thing they did.
Yeah.
It was magical. I mean, there's really something. Back to the Devil Is in It. People leave their mark on guitars.
Hmm.
You know, I think that I bought an old Dobro for a friend at Guitar Center in San Francisco, and I just happened to be up there, and I went in and I looked at it, and he'd been looking for one, and I said, buy this thing now. And took it home and brought it home and gave it to him. And he's a luthier, and he kind of tore it apart immediately. And in the guitar, he found a little package of tobacco and a stump of a cigarette. And
Yeah.
and he said, "Oh my God!" And I said, "Don't ever take it out. You know, leave it in there. I mean, come on." Bill Monroe scratching the headstock off of his F5, you know, just because he didn't want to deal with Gibson anymore. And
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, it's just, and those kind of things. I reference John Thomas that is carrying around the first guitar that the women produced, and another guitar
At Kalamazoo.
another guitar that was probably next to Woody Guthrie's guitar in sales. A New York shop had bought 3 of the same thing, and Guthrie bought one, and this soldier bought one, and somebody else bought one. But these guitars that have been overseas with men and in war with men, and it was there. I mean, you can't deny that. That's why I think your work is so profound, John, that you're taking the time to go out there and find it. I mean, we could all believe the story that Hank Williams D28 now belongs to Neil Young. And I probably think that's true, but I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I remember talking to a very famous person in the vintage guitar firmament, who is absolutely certain that there is, if I can quote, there is no way that little Hank would have sold his papa's guitar.
Yeah.
And who knows? And who knows how many guitars Hank Williams actually owned?
Yeah, I think that comes out too. I mean, when I was playing and performing in the 70s, I had an electric and an acoustic, and that was all I had.
Mm.
You know, you didn't have 5 electrics
No, absolutely.
backing you up, and you didn't walk on stage like Jackson Brown with 40 40 unbelievable acoustics,
Yeah, exactly.
and we don't have any idea. Somebody said Tom Petty had 100 guitars. Well, people that moved my gear in LA in the early 80s moved his gear as well. That 100 guitars was drop in the bucket.
Absolutely.
Thousands of
Joe Bonamassa apparently has over 1,000 amplifiers and many, many more guitars. But it comes back to I had for quite a while my father's wardrobe that we had in the bedroom in our old house, and it had room for 2 shirts, 2 suits, an overcoat or a winter coat, as he would call it, and a hat. And all the clothes he ever owned were in that wardrobe, because he had a best suit and a suit he wore for work.
Yeah.
And he had 1 hat, and in his youth, he had 2 shirts, but 8 collars, because he grew up in an age where you had celluloid collars, and so you couldn't afford, and you didn't need anymore, because you had 1 shirt you were wearing and the other shirt that was in the wash, and that's how it worked. And now, Lord knows how much stuff we have around us, even if you don't, and forgive me if people are watching who genuinely have no money, but even if you don't have much money, the fact that you can go to a store these days and buy a brand new suit for about $30. I'm not saying it's been made of the finest material, but it will be a brand new suit for $30. And people buy clothes, never wash them, just throw them away, because you can buy a dress or a blouse. But to your point on stories, I heard about this guy, and he's in the book. I don't use his name. There's a guy called James Bullard. And James Bullard left home in Mississippi when he was 8. His family couldn't afford for him to be at home, so he went on the road, as did Josh White when he was 8. Josh White was a leader of a blind musician. They all had lead boys, and the lead boy would guide the musician, beat the tambourine, take the hat round, and tell the musician what was happening. And I'm not certain whether it's totally true, but in enough books about Josh White, he apparently was the lead boy for blind Arthur Blake for a while. Anyway, James Bullard leaves home. He ends up getting a boat to Liverpool when he was about 15. Varying stories, stowed away, someone took him, or whatever. He joins a traveling circus as a boxer when he's in Scotland. And when they move to Paris, he goes with them. In Paris, this is before the First World War, he opens he doesn't open it. He goes to a nightclub and he becomes the manager of a club called the Grand Duke. And I went to the place where it was. It's now a Chinese restaurant. but it's the right address. And I met this woman who remembers her father telling her that it was a nightclub during the war, and her father was in Paris during the war. This is the First World War. James Bullard joins the French Air Force, and he becomes the first black pilot in the French Air Force. He gets awarded, he gets shot down, he goes back into the air, he gets awarded some medal or whatever, and then he stays running that nightclub, the Grand Duke, until about a year before the Germans arrive. And he decides, you can see which way the life's going, so he leaves with his daughter and they go back to America. But when Charles de Gaulle, after the war, Second World War finished, goes to America, one of the things he asks the American president is, I'd like to meet a guy called James Bullard, because I have a Légion d'honneur for him. And the White House, got to find this guy, got to find this guy. And they find him, and he's driving an elevator in New York. And they bring him to Washington, and Charles de Gaulle gives him his Légion d'honneur. And I met a couple of people who remember their parents talking about the Grand Duke, which was a nightclub, it was a blues club. Ida Red played there. Lots of black musicians, black musicians played there pre-war. And it became a sort of spy center because it's where a lot of Germans during the war went to listen to jazz or jazz, and whiskey, strong wine, and women, and they opened their mouths. So, and I'd never have got to meet James Bullard had I not gone to Paris, had I not gone to this jazz record shop, and then met the mother of the guy who ran the jazz record shop. And that was no sort of miracle, but you only in a way do you sort of get these stories if you get off your backside and go walking. And
absolutely. I went to, last time I was in Dallas, I had done the research of where Johnson did his recordings for a lot of them, and went to the location, and it was some kind of weird bank with all kinds of heavy security iron doors in front of it. But as I walked up, there was a little altar that had been created of people leaving empty bottles of booze and flowers and stuff like that. And magic.
Yeah.
You know, magic, just magic. We discount it so much in our lives. And if we open ourselves up to it, it's quite wonderful.
So, John, one of the things about this new book is that it is, as I understand it, largely this collection of nonfiction stories that you've woven a fictional element through to kind of tie it all together into this music guitar themed narrative. How did you put that together? What was the creative spark that put that together for you?
Well, one was, I was wondering how to tell the story. And an original, when I first started thinking about, I've got all these stories, but I need to know more. How do I put them together into, I think that they can't just sit in a drawer. So I started thinking, well, I'll write a sort of a part 2 to The Devil Is In It. And it wasn't ever intended to be the scraps that I couldn't use, because they were much better than scraps. They were really great stories. And I thought, how do I use this? And I started thinking of my own youth. And I started playing guitar quite late, when I was about 14. and I haven't got an awful lot better, but I've stuck at it. And my sort of father, whilst he was always very supportive of me, and at least I wasn't playing a scratchy violin, not that there's anything wrong with the violin, but my house wasn't full, our house wasn't full of music. So I started sort of thinking about my own sort of musical journey, childhood. And I thought, how do I put this together? I thought, well, I can put it in the eyes of someone maybe a bit like me now, someone who might find a guitar, and then we go on this journey and we meet all these various characters. There was a fascinating Woody Allen film, a couple of fascinating. I know we don't tend to talk too much about Woody Allen these days, which is, I think, a shame, because no one knows really what happened. But he did a film called Zelig. I don't know whether you remember that, which was used quite a lot of photo montage and had him sort of appearing in, he was with President Kennedy and whatever. It was a bit of trickery. But he also did a film set in Paris where something magical happens, and this guy who's wandering around Paris goes back in time, and he meets F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda Fitzgerald at a bar, and he meets Gertrude Stein, who was a great critic, and meets Picasso and whatever. And I thought, well, all these stories all have real people in them. Maybe I can just weave it together by having a guy go around and meet the people who knew the people. And then I thought, well, a guitar would be a great cipher to do that, in search of something. And something really, really weird happened. I sort of was looking at a YouTube video of a guy who repairs old vintage amps, mainly Gibson amps. And he had this old I guess it would have been 1940s Gibson amp. And it had a plate on it, which was the name of a music company in St. Louis. And I thought that could be the clue. So I thought, I wonder whether it's still there. And making international phone calls is not quite so expensive these days. So I tried to get hold of a directory. Remember those directories that used to, well, I don't remember them either. There was one in Britain was called Kelly's Directory. And basically it had the names and address of everyone who had a business in the city. And I phoned the Central Library in St. Louis. And I said, do you have a directory from the 1940s? And I spoke to an amazing, very polite woman who said, I'll have a look. Can you ring me back in half an hour? And I rang her back in half an hour, and she said, yes, I've found a directory from 45. And yes, the name of the record of the music store you've mentioned, they were definitely there, and they were on this particular street. But then I've looked a little bit later, and they moved building, and then they moved somewhere else. So that then gave me another sort of strand to the story, that maybe that's where the guitar came from. So the people who read the book, first off, and there were about 6 of them, 2 I knew, and 3 had bought The Devil Is In It, and I'd had a bit of a dialogue with them. And I wrote to them, I said, would you be interested in being an early reader of the book? And they loved to, really, really interesting. And 3 of the guys, and they were all guys, made the same observation, said, even though I know, or you tell me, that this is a work of fiction, I found myself Googling the character in it, the musician. And one of them said, I spent about an hour and a half online, even though I knew that you'd told me that he was perhaps not a real person. You haven't used his real name. And that's what caught my imagination. So that's what I built on, which was, I've treated these characters as real, because a lot of them really are. I mean, I don't use James Bullard's name, but I do use the Grand Duke Jazz Club. It was in the basement, and I went to the local property office and found that the lease was for a while owned by James Bullard. So it was the right place. And it was now a nail bar down in the basement. But stuff like that. So that's what I ended up doing, was putting all the real characters together. So there are some amazing stories. So do you know about Hawaiian dollars? Do they ring a bell?
No.
During the war, after Pearl Harbor, the American administration was convinced that the Japanese were going to do a landing on Hawaii. There was no way that America was in a fit state to actually deploy enough soldiers to defend Hawaii. And obviously bits of the, quite a few, there was a lot of casualties, and the fleet didn't exist anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And their big concern was there are millions and millions of dollars on Hawaii in the various cities. And if the Japanese invade, they will confiscate all of these dollars. And the great thing about the American dollar, as you know, is that it's as good as gold, literally. It's a usable currency in every country in the world. And it doesn't matter how old a dollar is, which I found astounding. A 1910 $20 bill, you can take it, albeit into a bank, but they will give you $20 for it because the dollar hasn't changed size or whatever. So what the administration at the time was worried about is the Japanese are going to invade, they're going to confiscate all these millions of dollars, and they will be able to use these millions of dollars to buy munitions and food, et cetera, and they will effectively be using our own dollars to fight us. We've got to do something. So what happened was they collected all the dollars up, and while they were collecting them in Hawaii, they sent out an army contingent to do this. And meanwhile, the mint, or the whatever we call it, the mint in England, who issue all the currency, but whatever it's called, maybe it's the Fed.
Same.
So they printed whole sets of dollars. Initially, only $5 and $10 bills, and on the back, they overprinted in red Hawaii. And the idea, and then the army, when they ship these Hawaiian dollars out, so on the front it's a regular dollar bill, and on the back it's just got the overprint that says Hawaii. They burnt the original dollars. They put them in. In fact, there were 2 crematoriums in Hawaii, and they used them to burn all the original dollars. And you went into the bank and you brought your $500 or whatever you had under the bed, and you got 500 Hawaiian dollars. And the reason they did it was that if the Japanese did invade, they could say, these dollars are not legal tender. Hawaiian dollars are not international legal tender. They are only usable on Hawaii. So, and there's an amazing rumor that amongst the contingent of soldiers who went out to do all the burning were a number of well-known mafia characters, and that not necessarily all the original dollars were burned. So that story's in there.
Wow.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So I've woven all of these stories together, and I think it's quite an adventure. And my beta readers said, one of the guys said, I ended up reading it for 7 hours on the run. I think if I was a watch collector or a clock collector, I'd have written a book called The Clock Detective, or The Watch Detective. Because I'm sure if you're an enthusiast for watches, there's hundreds of stories about the first watch and the last watch and such stuff. But I always think if you've got a passion about something, and Lord knows we know that certainly in America, but also in Britain, we have a passion for guitars. To your point, 30, 40 years ago, actually maybe a bit more, a working musician would own 2 guitars, and that would be enough. But now, you even talk to well, certainly amateur musicians, but you just talk to a regular working musician, and he's probably got a couple of dozen. And guitars haven't got any cheaper. They've just got a bit more. I suppose we've just got more money, and the passion is there. So it's a book. Who should read this book? They always say, who should read it? Well, if you've got an interest in guitars, then definitely. If you've got an interest in a bit of romance, then definitely. If you've got an interest in history, definitely read it. And I was going to show you one of my few props. So that's the cover. So for those of you who have read the A Devil Is in It, this is an illustration by Drew Christie, who did all the illustrations in the original book. And the great thing about Drew is that he doesn't really like a very precise brief. So he said, "Oh, tell me about the book. Who's in it? What happens?" So if you look on there, there's the eagle thing in the middle is actually the badge for the 45th US Infantry.
You have to hold it up a little higher.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
There?
There we go.
Right. So that's the infantry badge, 45th Infantry badge. The hand there's a missing little finger. Well, that's an important character in the book. There's obviously a couple of guitars, and then the whirly things are actually the things you see on a relief map. They're the heights, and they're all sort of quite important things in the book. And as they say, you have to read the book to work out why these things are important. So that's how that was a sort of genesis of how the book came about. But I suppose you could work out and say which of all the stories in the book, and there's lots of them, which ones are true, which ones are real, where are the real people? I'll say another thing. Have you ever heard of during the Second World War, the Ritchie Boys?
I've not.
Right. The Ritchie Boys were mainly guys, who'd come to America in the 1930s, and they'd escaped from Germany and Austria. Many of them, the vast majority of them, were of Jewish heritage. Not all of them were. Some of them were just disagreed with what was happening in Germany, and they were recruited by the army. And the plan was that they were all trained, some of them for 3 or 4 years, at Fort Ritchie. And when the D-Day landings happened, there were hundreds of them, and they went across on the boats, on the landing craft, and they parachuted in. But they weren't wearing American uniforms. They were parachuted behind lines, and they captured Germans and brought them back across the lines to be interrogated, or they interrogated them, or they did other maybe not such lovely things in order to find out what the German plan was, what their defenses were, where different divisions were, etc., etc. And there were a number of black Ritchie Boys who were parachuted in and went into Paris while Paris was occupied, in order to get lost in Paris. And the clever idea was no German would believe that a black musician or a black barman was a spy. So lots
Wow.
and lots and lots of stories. And
Oh,
in a way, it's a bit like, as someone very kindly wrote to me about the devil, is maybe it requires a foreigner, that's me, to dig around amongst the history and come up with a story that tells the American story. And
That's awesome. That's
so
yeah.
that was the plan. That was the
Yeah.
idea.
Incredible, incredible, John.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, my wife is going to find out what a wonderful Christmas present she's getting me as soon as it gets here. Uh,
It is
so
yeah, it's interesting actually. I've mailed everyone who bought The Devil Is in It, because I figured, well, I've designed it as a companion edition, so it looks, it's actually a reversal of the colors. It doesn't come in a very fancy slipcase because I didn't feel that the economic climate was right for such an expensive production. But so it went on sale last Wednesday, and we sold about 100 books in the first 3 or 4 days. And and there aren't many of them. I'm not actually being clear as to how many there are, but there's fewer of them than The Devil Is in It.
oh no, I
So
waited too long on that one. I'm not
you
going
may
to
have
wait on
waited
this
too
one.
long. But I know someone in the publishers who might be able to help you out.
Okay. I do have the iPad version, which I have to say is been a wonderful way to bring it about with me and show it to people. But since my father was a bookbinder, I have a love for physical, well-made books, which honestly there aren't that many these days. So
Well, one of your members actually got book number one. He was, I won't mention his name. He was very kind. I think I may have replied to an email. He was very taken with The Devil Is in It, and then at some point I said, I'm writing a follow up. I didn't know quite what it was going to be, and he said, I want to have number one. Can I have number one? And he kept on writing to me, and we've had a sort of bit of a toing and froing of messages. And in the end, I relented. I said, okay, I'll reserve number one, and I got a few advance copies. So he actually was the first person to read the physical book, which I think pleased him. Although he does point out it weighs 2.1 kilos, so 4 pounds ish. So it's not a book that's that easy to read in bed at night. But if you've got a very wobbly table or bed, it's quite handy for stopping the.
Well, so now that you have the guitar detective behind you and the marketing we're going to be helping with here, and I'm sure that there will be other websites and people who are going to be interested in hearing your story and helping promote it. What are you going to do next?
I don't know really. So what happened? So it's taken me about 5 years to write it, because I always found myself doing more research, and there's some very interesting. So Saint-Tropez in the south of France is a beautiful old village. It's got more very expensive clothing shops than you could throw a stick at. But it's where and it has amazing beaches. It's the home of Brigitte Bardot, and where a number of films about the south of France have been shot. And I happen to have some friends who live very, very near. But it's where the American, and I should know the name of the force, but I don't. It's where the Americans first landed in the south of France. It's where they went on the beaches. And Saint-Tropez was, the Germans didn't put up too much of a fight, but the trouble with bullets is that even if they're not particularly well aimed, they do actually have a fairly devastating effect. And there's a cemetery and a small museum not far from Saint-Tropez where there are 491 American soldiers buried. It's a very special place to go. And that's in the book, but Saint-Tropez is in the book as well. There are lots of sort of very special places around that area, even though it's now a place where the very wealthy go and take their yachts and their big boats and such. So I'm in 2 or 3 minds about the place. So, but it's a very special place to go to. So that's sort of there, and I was sort of, when I was doing research there, I sort of got down many rabbit holes. But I was very near to finishing the book and doing the final edit. And it takes a long time, as you can imagine, and I know as Richard knows. And there were 4 or 5 different versions of this, but we got very close to a final version in January of 24. And I'd had a couple of small incidents along the road that had robbed me of a little bit of my eyesight. But I always managed to sort of recover. And it isn't to do with the eyes, it's to do with my brain. So I sort of am used to a little sense of being on a bit of borrowed time. And in January, I just had a brain bleed. And one evening, early one evening. And I walked into the living room and I said to my wife, I can't see. And she said, what do you mean you can't see? I said, I've got no vision. It's gone. And I sort of sat down and we phoned our daughter-in-law, who's a nurse, and she said, ring for an ambulance immediately and go to hospital. And I'd had a big bleed. And I was sort of quite stoic about it. And they kept me in hospital for a week and I literally had no vision. And so going to the Louis sort of was a bit of a challenge, and eating food was a bit of a challenge because I can't see what's in front of me. And I tell you, eating breakfast cereal when you have no vision is a very messy process. So after about a week and a half, they said, well, you've had a big bleed. It's flooded the part of your brain that processes vision. You've had bleeds there before. This is the big one. And I remember saying to the doctor, I sort of was, he said, you're taking this very well. I said, yeah, I was, but I suddenly realized that we've got 2 grandchildren, a 2-year-old who was 1 actually at the time, and a 5-year-old. I just realized I'm never going to see them grow up. I mean, I know what my wife looks like, and I know what my grown-up children look like. They're never going to change. Maybe that's a good thing. They will never grow old. But I'll never see my grandchildren. And that really put me in a bad place. And so I went home, but I had lots of therapy. I learned how to walk with a cane, with a white stick. Couldn't read. And my guitar teacher, who I see or don't see online, said, we can work with this. You know, Doc Watson did it. Jose Feliciano did it. Blind Blake did it. If Blind Blake was truly completely blind. Discuss. And I started to get bits of vision back, just small pools of vision. But then I realized I couldn't read. So I could see the words, but I couldn't letters rather, but I couldn't work out where one word ended and another word started. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, well, I ain't going to be finishing the book because I won't have any idea what I'm doing. So I had about 9 months off, during which time I regained a bit more vision. I have lots of big holes in my vision. They're not black holes. They're absolutely transparent. They're so it's not that I have a black or a white hole. Just I don't see things. So I've got bits and pieces. I tell you, closing your eyes and playing your guitar to simulate what a blind musician might be working with is one thing. You sneak a little peek, and those of us who can play guitar moderately well, whatever that means, you don't really look at the fretboard, or hopefully you don't look at the fretboard too much. You can work your way through certainly the first 3 positions, but actually you do. You sort of sneak a little peek to see, am I at 5? Am I, can I put that chord? Or you roughly know, have I got my little finger on the right thing? And it's bloody hard playing guitar without being able to see. It's very frustrating. And so I have my weekly lesson of frustration with my guitar teacher. But anyway, so one of the great things that came out of this was my son Jeremy, who's 40, said, so what are we going to do about the book? And I said, I can't do it. I mean, I can't see the computer screen. I can't read properly, whatever. He said, we can do this together. So for the last, actually it was probably this time last year, he started coming round and we'd sit at my desk and we'd talk about the book. He'd read a section. And I said, well, I think we need to do a bit of this. We need to move that to there probably if it's going to work. He said, I'll do it. Let me do a draft and then I'll read it to you. So we spent about 9 months, maybe a bit longer, doing the book together. He didn't write it. He said, I'm not writing this. I'm just going to be your eyes and your typing fingers. And it's the first time Jeremy and I have done a creative endeavor together for probably since he was 9 and we made a model aircraft together. And it's been a wonderful journey, wonderful experience. And I think it's improved the book actually, because he has the sensibilities and the views of a 40-year-old, not a 70-year-old. So there's a bit of, I don't think you can say that really, not anything too desperate. He said, I don't think it would, that's not gonna, I don't think that's how it should happen. And he'd give me a challenge and we say, okay, well, how might it happen that would be maybe a little bit more modern, even though the book's written set in 1990. So that's been a great experience. So to be honest, I think this is the last one. I don't think, it's the amount of research that you have to do, the amount of reading. I mean, I don't really read too much these days. I listen to books. I listen to audiobooks, which are fabulous now. My wife reads the newspaper to me in the morning. So my news is sort of broadly edited by my wife, who says, oh, you might find this interesting, or there's this story, or whatever. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I was going to say, I'm thinking here, boy, I wish I had an editor to present the daily news to me and decide which exactly. I should hear and which I shouldn't.
He said, you don't want to hear about the front page. There's a picture on today's Times, a picture of Lindsay Lohan at the premiere of her new film, wearing a very fetching dress, apparently, but she's holding a handbag that's shaped like a small guitar. So a lot of stuff sort of passed me by. So I do generally think, well, actually, that's not true. There is a new book, because it's a book that I was doing before, which is a new edition of The Devil Is in It. So the University of Texas Press approached me a few years back and their director, the guy who actually runs the press, and they produce lots of books. A lot of them are academic, but also a lot of them are for general readers. So, and they do a lot of music books, really, really good stuff. And I remember when I spoke to the guy, I said, I've got about 8 of your books on my bookshelf. And a couple of them he'd edited when he was just an editor. So we talked about doing a new version of the book. And he said, it'd be great if you could do something that updated the book, because the Devil Is In It finishes round about 2000. But here we are now in 2020. So he said, could you update it? And we started going through the process. I thought it was going to take me about 4 or 5 months, but I hadn't reckoned on the academic publishing process. So effectively, you have an editor, and Robert Devons was my editor. And we discussed at great length how we might adapt the book. We would just use the history sections, what might need to be played up now if we were writing it again. It took me, in the end, about a year to write a manuscript. And I was working on it virtually every day, in between working on The Guitar Detective. The manuscript then gets sent to peer group readers, to academics who have published in their own right. And when I got that back, those 2 reports back, was literally a week before I had my brain bleed. Now, I wouldn't say that the reports brought on my brain bleed, but they were very positive, but they described an enormous amount of work. I think you should look at this. I think there needs to be more balance here. Had you thought about including this person? And so, in fact, while I was getting my brain back together, Jeremy and I also worked on that. And that comes out, I think it's available now for pre-ordering through the University of Texas Press website. And it's a very, if you own The Devil Is In It, it's a very different book. You'll recognize some things. So I take it decade by decade. But the good news is they've done a beautiful job. It's really nicely produced. And it's only $40 or $39.99, I think. So that's going to be, and I think that'll be my last book. I don't think I've got it. I just don't have the capability to start with a blank sheet of paper. Although never say never.
Yes, it is available now. I'm just looking really quickly here.
Oh, the wonders of the internet.
Yeah, well, it's when you mentioned that there were limited copies of The Guitar Detective, I was slightly put aside here. So while you were talking, I ordered my copy. So I know it's on its way, and I don't have to worry about it being sold out when this podcast hits the airwaves, so to speak. But yes, University of Texas Press, it is there. That's wonderful.
Hey, this, yeah, so you're getting, I've just seen it. It's very kind of you. Hey, we generated another order.
There you go. It makes the whole experience here worthwhile.
Yeah, and it shows that it's live.
Yeah, well, and if you only talk to each potential customer for, an hour and a half or whatever, you could.
I'm minded to say this, and of course the little devil on my shoulder says, don't say it, but I'm going to have to say it. The thing is, Tad, if you'd arrived on time, you'd have got a free copy of the book in the same way that Richard has.
Oh, well, sorry.
Only joking. Only joking. Seriously, I'm only joking.
Yeah.
John, I want to thank you for your time. Any time spent with you is truly inspirational, rewarding. It spurs my curiosity. It's a wonderful experience, and I really want to thank you for working through the issues that would allow us to do this, and putting up with us changing times and doing all that, and dealing with a 8-hour time zone difference or 9-hour time zone difference. So I can't tell you how grateful I am for you sharing.
Yes, this has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really, really anxious to get my copy so I can read it.
No, it's been it has been fun. Well, I hope it's fun for the for listeners. I'll send you some details so that if people are interested. The University of Texas Press edition is I said to the guy who runs it, I don't think people who bought the original book are going to buy the new edition, but when we got to where we got, it's a very different read. So let's not be being a huckster and drumming up business, but they've both been fun to do. As I say, my last book, but
there's a pre-order on Amazon for it right now.
There we go.
It looks like it comes out September 16th, 2025. Yeah. So
other vendors exist.
Yeah.
Well, according to the University of Texas Press, it's coming out August 6th.
Well,
it is.
Hey, John, you don't have a promo code you'd like to share with all of our listeners, do you?
I'll do my best. I'll talk to. I will have. I've spoken to Robert about that, and obviously, I mean, I thought it was a great wedding. I was very thrilled to be invited to Venice with Jeff. We just had a great time. I mean, the private jet wasn't all that it was run up to be. I mean, heck, been in one private jet, been in another. That's what I say. But I know, in fact, he said, if you're talking to people, tell them, buy the book through the University of Texas Press site. I don't need the money. Shit, I go home and I burn money to keep myself warm. So, and apparently he does it on $500 notes. Apparently they crackle nicely. So, you've got Jeff's blessing to try and buy it directly from, and I will talk to the guys there. So don't pre-order the book from the University Press yet, and I'll give you a promo code.
Sounds good. I'll leave the website up here on my desktop, so we can try it out as soon as you have that.
John, we wish you the best of days.
Yes.
And you too. And I hope your foot gets better, Richard.
Yeah, let's see about that. Maybe it won't take 45 minutes to take a shower anymore, but
it's no fun.
Those 50 stitches that came out yesterday, boy, they're alive down there.
Do they still give you a leather strop to put in between your teeth? Just bite down on that.
No, we spent a lot of time working out the anesthesia and the treatment afterwards, because I'm pretty sensitive to it.
Sure.
But
this is America. We use polyurethane straps.
Yeah. You don't get leather straps. John, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to say we're going to end this one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you so much for participating. We love it.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
You're the real deal, buddy.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Till later.
Here we
Number
go.
99 coming up next.
Yep, number 99.
Oh, I should have waited. I wanted to be 100.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out 100.
Yeah, and I think it's got to be. Well, is it not going to be Richard?
Well, we've gone down a lot of rabbit holes with it.
Yeah, there's every reason why it should be, but actually, in a funny way, every reason why maybe not. But anyway, that's what you do in your spare time.
Yeah, we're thinking about a greatest hits, kind of like combining a lot of that stuff, and then
you get your film editing chops back together.
Yeah, I do. I certainly do. So you have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much.
Pleasure. I'll send you links.
Yes, please.
Give me a few days.
Yeah.
I'll send you a variety of links, and I will talk to, because it'd be nice. So I think they'll offer 40% off. I wish I could, but producing books on very low volume is painfully expensive.
Yeah, please send us the links, because I'm sure people would rather buy it in that way than.
Yeah, absolutely. They're gonna get it as soon. In fact, they'll probably get it before Amazon ship, because they won't ship before the 16th. So
yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk about that. We'll not talk about. I'll email you. I'm gonna
Okay,
go.
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Perfect.
Been a ball.
So much. Off for dinner. Be well.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this installment of the Santa Cruz Coffee Break. For more music-related fun, please join the Santa Cruz Guitar Players Forum at SCGCPF or santacruzguitarplayers.com. If you have any questions or possible podcast topics, please contact us. If you have a product or service that you feel would be of value to our listeners, please consider adding your support and keeping the coffee pot on. Contact us for more information. We ask that you hit the like, follow, bell, or bookmark buttons so we can keep you informed of upcoming podcast episodes. We hope you enjoyed Santa Cruz Coffee Break. Now it's time to go play your guitar.